Hello and welcome everyone to another Heart Mind Happy Hour episode. I am very, very excited for the conversation that I'm having today with a kinesiologist, an energy worker healer, Ian Haycroft, who is coming to us all the way from Australia. I love the global aspect of these conversations. It just makes my heart sing to connect people across the globe. And so really excited to have Ian here, whom I will welcome in just a moment. And before I do that, just want to say this is Heart Mind Happy Hour. I'm your host, Holly Copeland. I'm a human potential coach, new Reiki practitioner as of today, and I don't know, consciousness explorer. And I love doing these conversations because I love talking to people about healing, consciousness, meditation, neuroscience, and I find the intersection of all these just fascinating. So I do these conversations as a way to explore those topics with some really knowledgeable, fascinating people at the cutting edge of that work. And I'm very pleased today to have with me Ian Haycroft. Like I said, he's a kinesiologist and has a really interesting varied background, and I was able to do a session with him, and I'm just really impressed with his work and wanted him to talk more about it. So he is here to share with us today. Welcome, Ian, very much to our show.
Thanks, Holly. Nice to be here. Hello, everybody.
Really nice to have you here. And my tradition is to just bring us into presence for a minute. A lot of challenges going on in the world today, on earth that needs a lot of healing, people who need a lot of healing. So let's just take a moment to come into presence together. Let's close our eyes. Let's give thanks for the gift of being here together, sending prayers and wishes for a healthy, healing planet and for all those people out there who could use our healing support and energy. And ask for this conversation to help and heal and bring wisdom to all those who are watching. Take a couple deep breaths. And coming back now to the space. Well, truly, truly welcome. It is quite an honor to have you here, and thank you for taking your time to be with us today, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let's start. You have a really varied background, some interesting little history. So I would love if you would just start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'm old enough to have a varied journey. That's the starting point. Yeah, I mean, I'm coming to you from the rural countryside of northern New South Wales in Australia, and it feels like a long journey to have gotten here. I think in relation to what I do, I think the key parts of the journey are that when I was going to uni back in the early 70s in Melbourne, I got very, very interested in meditation and yoga and all those things, and that started me on a journey. Right? I was a good old Aussie footballer and did all those things, but then I started to get interested in all these other parts of life. And in 1977, I left Australia to go and actually go to India to a Muktananda ashram, and which I actually never made it to, because I went to Nepal. I walked around Nepal, went to a Buddhist monastery, and had just experiences that said to me, there's so much more to life than what I had thought. And you know, I was on, like lots of Aussies in those days, I was going to take a year off to see the world. And that year, I actually returned to Australia about 22 years later. So I spent time in India. Then I got, again, as lots of people in those days did, I got a good dose of dysentery that made me realize I have to go somewhere to actually get better. I went to England, was in hospital for a couple of weeks, then lived in Wales on a community in a slate quarry in Wales, trying to figure out how to save the planet. And then across to America, and hitchhiked across America. And to cut a long story short, there I met my wife. And rather than passing through America, I stayed in America for about 20 years. And I had our family there. And I worked in all kinds of different occupations, mostly in international relief, raising 6 children and doing all that was necessary to actually survive with having created too many children. And then eventually work took us to China for 3 years, where I worked as a general manager of a vegetable export company. So it all sounds hardly the background for a kinesiologist or a spiritual searcher, but in amongst all of that, that pathway became more and more important. And then eventually we finally turned up back in Australia when I was mid to late 40s with 6 small children and a family. And it was really one of those moments of, okay, what am I going to do when I grow up? And I really felt I had to bring the kind of corporate life to an end and start doing what I love to do. Of course, I had no idea what that was, and had a few showdowns with the creator, I should say, and said, I need to know what to do. And I was guided to the kinesiology. And so I learnt kinesiology, and I opened up a clinic in Noosa on the Sunshine Coast in Australia, which is a beautiful resort area, actually. And so I began working in a clinic and having my own clients doing kinesiology. And as I did that, then I developed it step by step into the kind of system that I felt was helpful to people, which focuses on the emotional and energetic elements of people's journey. So I did that, and now I'm at the point where I'm old enough and ugly enough to feel like it's time to go beyond just doing this work in a clinic. And so I set it up. I've set myself up in a way that I can reach out, hopefully, to the world and help people who this might be valuable for. So that's the short version of a long story.
That's quite a journey, and I love how you took a 22-year walkabout, including the time in the U.S. It's pretty funny. Yeah. It's very interesting. And so to get a little bit into the work that you do, and which is just, I think, so, the emotional and energetic support. There's, people have so much need right now for that kind of support. And as kind of humanity is kind of collectively waking up, this ability to tap into our unconscious and sort of dig a little bit underneath the duff and find, find that stuff so that we can deal with it and make it light and not be bound to it anymore. It's just such important work. And I love what you wrote on your Clearmind process description about this being this first stage in the space-bound rocket and propelling us out of the gravity of unconscious limitations. I love that visual image and analogy. So tell us a little bit more about the work that you do. And, a lot of the viewers here are really into biofeedback. So also kind of weaving in kind of how does this fit in a biofeedback realm? But yeah, please just explain a little bit more about the work itself.
Yeah, no, certainly. Let me start at the end first in the sense that it's my experience that we are all inevitably destined to be awakened to our full conscious understanding of who we are. And I think the kind of work that I do is one of many ways to start the self-inquiry that gets us on that on that trajectory, which is why I
Mhm.
use the first stage rocket. I think, to explain the work, kinesiology uses a muscle testing technique. And there are these days lots and lots of versions of kinesiology, and like lots of human endeavors, then there are those who say, no, mine's the only one that's a good one, and mine's the only one that works, and that's not real, and all that kind of stuff happens. But I think that the muscle testing technique itself, which is the basis of all kinds of kinesiology, and lots of chiropractors and osteopaths these days use a muscle testing technique to help them discover where there might be misalignment, for example. So I use that basic muscle testing technique to help navigate the unconscious. And by that I mean, my view is that everything that happens to us in our lives, physically, chemically, emotionally, and energetically, is all stored. It's all stored in the cells, or the energy that gives life to those cells. And so that's a lot of information. And I think very wisely, we have this system set up where most or all of that information is stored unconsciously. So the tip of the iceberg is what we're consciously doing, and the rest of that iceberg is the unconscious record of that which has occurred, happened to us. And by definition, you can't access that unconsciously easily, or certainly not just using words. So the muscle testing technique allows a method, it's not the only one, but a method to be a pointer to what's going on unconsciously, because we can use a muscle test to get a strong or a weak response to a statement that we might make about what's going on in someone's system. And so using that muscle test, we can ask, show us what's going on in relation to something physical, something chemical, something emotional, something energetic. And as I think I said to you in our session, I focus on the emotional and energetic, because if the muscle test shows something physical and chemical, then I say, please go to somebody who's really good at that, and including doctors. I don't have any, I think so often people think if you're part of the natural healing world that you might have some antipathy towards the medical profession. I do have plenty of reservations, but, as far as diagnosis, there's some incredible diagnosis available to people on the physical and chemical level. So, so I use that muscle testing technique and a chart, just a structure. So using a muscle testing technique sometimes can seem very much like being psychic, because you can discover information, and often people say to me, how do you know that? But the muscle testing technique is really a very simple one that anyone can learn, actually, and we can discover information. And so I learned a certain system, and then I've modified that system just really as a structure to help me get closer and closer to what might be the issue at hand for people unconsciously. So I often say to people that when I'm doing a session with people, the healer in the room is not me, it's you. Because all of the information that you need to get past whatever is blocking you, or whatever might be the dis-ease that you're experiencing, is within you. So the muscle testing is just a pointer, one of many, but I think it's a fascinating pointer to help discover what might be at work in that unconscious rest of the pyramid that is either interfering or making the present more difficult. And so my experience, having done it now, I've been doing it for 20 years, is that it can often really be helpful just to help people discover an element of the unconscious that they could then clear or release or reintegrate just by understanding what it is.
Yeah.
So that's the overview.
I would love to see your chart. You said you might share it, but before we get to that, just without going into the physics we don't understand, but just sort of in your conceptualization of how this works, like who's answering And how, in your mind, how is this energy, like how is this record that you have of something, a past issue, how is it being stored and responded to? In like, how does that conceptual model work in your mind? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think in my mind, again, I start with the idea that I think we are fundamentally a vehicle of the expression of consciousness. So, and that's expressed through us being a physical body and a chemical body, an emotional and energetic body. And you know, I am not a scientist, so can I say exactly how the patterns of recognition and information move? Actually, I don't know. But you know, more and more research shows that we can get amazing feedback from our bodies. So for me, the muscle test, and again, I think lots of people will have experienced that. You know, it's a bit hard to do on Zoom, right? But often doctors or chiropractors will use push on someone's arm or leg, and it'll be strong or weak.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the mind body system, and when I think about it, it's the mind body energy system is able to respond, and a muscle test is a really simple way of gauging a response. So a strong response from the muscle system, the mind body energy system, is I'm okay with whatever it is that I'm putting forward. I'm okay. For example, I'm a woman, I'm a man. I'm okay being a woman. We can get a strong, if it's a woman, a strong or a weak, right? A strong response would be the system saying, I'm okay with that. There is no weakness, no issue with that. A weak response is the system saying there's something energetically, a connection that's not okay, and there's more to discover. And so the process, it's a bit binary, right? It's like an on and an off, you know, strong and a not strong, right? And using that, we can go from, okay, rather than simsalabim, I'm a psychic, I know what's wrong with you, I can ask the system using muscle tests, show us which doorway to go. Is it the physical, the chemical, the emotional, the energetic? The muscle system will show which doorway to go through. And then we can get more specific. Let's say it's the emotional doorway. Then we can get more specific. What element of the emotional doorway? And we can, again, hence the reason for a chart is just using a logical system to eliminate possibilities until we get more and more specific. Because I think we store information in our unconscious, most of which is filed perfectly well, right? If we use the computer analogy, some of those files either got a bit corrupted or there's an attachment, usually an emotional or energetic attachment, that we'd be better off without. So, but the unconscious has stored that in order to protect us. So me coming along and saying, look, I'm psychic, I know what it is, the unconscious is going to, if I can anthropomorphize the unconscious and say, it's going to go, well, who are you? Why should I trust you with anything, right? But if using a muscle test, I can get more and more specific about what element is at work in whatever we're dealing with, we get to a point where I think the unconscious goes, okay, you got it. Okay, clearly it's meant to go now. And so how does that clear? I think fundamentally it's about conscious recognition. So we become conscious of that which has been working formally in the unconscious. And that process, again, because the healer is not me, the healer is you, then that process of reintegration, because we are designed to be healthy, we're designed to be healed, that reintegration happens naturally. I don't have to do anything on my part because, again, the healer is within you.
Mm-hmm. And I so agree with that statement. We were designed to be healthy. I fundamentally believe that we should all be coming from that point of view and treating our bodies as though they want to be healthy, which is the opposite of how Western medicine sort of views everything as a problem. Your body is like, they would have you believe our bodies are all falling apart, you know, and it's just, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's just there's a whole realm of self-discovery and trusting our own pathway to healing that is not used so often. So again, I mean, if I've got a real problem in my brain, I'm happy to go to a brain surgeon. So I think there's so many wonderful things about Western medicine and the advancements, right? But I think one of the difficult or unfortunate other sides of that coin is that often people have then kind of given up their own agency over their own health. And so I think there's value in re-establishing that agency and say, look, there's things that you can discover yourself. And so much of our healing has to do with what's going on internally, energetically, consciously, rather than just physically and chemically. So the medical world is very strong on the physical and the chemical. And the emotional, certainly psychology and psychiatry has made incredible advances. So I'm not setting aside any of that, but I think my experience is that people underestimate incredibly how much insight they have themselves into what's going on. And if they can develop that, they can actually help to heal themselves.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And philosophically, even the human potential, coaching work that I do, and a lot of the uh, the biofeedback work is really about taking your own agency back, right?
Yeah.
And viewing your own health coming from a place of empowerment, not coming from a place of weakness, and that we can heal ourselves coming from a place of empowerment. Not that we can't view something that Western medicine has to offer as incredibly helpful. It can be, but this idea that you have of maintaining your own agency or retaining your power, I think the body is going to respond so much better, and we can be our own advocates internally, and our cells and body are intelligent. And when we believe that they are and come from that place, it's so much more likely to respond to healing,
Yeah, absolutely.
coming from that.
Yeah, and I think I have over this time, right, had clients on all kinds of on an incredible spectrum, right? I mean, some people will come to see me because they've got a sore knee, and I've got a sore knee, and I've been to chiropractors, I've had surgery, blah, 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 and it just doesn't get better. And for me, that's a classic example of, because there's not just physical things involved here. There is the emotional, the energetic. And so why only look at part of the story? Let's look at other parts of the story, which may help that part of your system to help heal itself, right? So right from sore knees to sore toes to sore marriages to blocks and meditation, I mean, all the way along that spectrum, I think there's some value in looking for that which in the unconscious might not be aligned with your healing. So let's discover is there anything in there to release? And my experience is there often is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, do you want to take a minute to show us your chart, because you had it available?
Yeah.
We don't have to spend a long time on it, but I do think it's really interesting to see sort of how you view, you're sort of a little under the hood.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share screen,
Okay.
get the technology going here. Can you see that?
I can see that. Yep.
Cool. So, a bit low tech. It's what's usually stuck on my wall. Excuse me. So, if someone comes to my clinic or these days online, then I will just do a series of muscle tests to, start with whatever the issue is. Let's, as an example, let's say sore knee. If someone has a sore knee, then I will ask the mind-body system using a muscle test. And I probably should interrupt here and just say, because some people might go, well, how do you do this online? Like, how do you muscle test people over thousands of miles? And I kind of discovered that by accident, because I was, seeing people in the clinic, and if someone's in the clinic, I can grab their arm and push on their arm. And but I have a technique where I can use my own muscle system to test others. And I had somebody in LA call me and says, "Can you do one of those sessions on me? I can't come see you." And I said, "Well, let's give it a go over the phone," right? And we discovered that it worked just fine. And I think the reason for that is not that strange, really, because we're energetic beings. We're all, we're consciousness vehicles, and we're all in this together, and we're all connected. So, the gurus were right. We are connected, and energy has no time and space, or very little time and space issues. So I can muscle test once I have someone's permission, and that's critical. Once I have someone's permission, then I can muscle test using my muscle system what's going on with that person. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. So you develop, this is your unique system that you're showing us here, yeah?
Yeah, so I learned a system, and then as I started to do it, like lots of people, then I just added to it and added bits that I thought, oh, that should be in the system. We should be able to ask about that. So just to go through it really, quickly. So let's say somebody's got a sore knee, then I'll ask the system, show us whether primarily, what do we have to show us what we need to clear to help with this sore knee. And then I'll test physical, chemical, emotional, energetic, which is to find which is the main doorway to go through. Now, if I find that the main door is physical, then I will say, look, you need to see a chiropractor or a surgeon, whatever, because I'm not going to pretend to fix people physically. And chemically, I'll say, go to a naturopath or see your doctor. But emotionally and energetically, if it tests that that's a doorway to go through, and there is always that doorway because it's part of who we are, then I can test that, right? So, let's say it's an emotional, there is an emotional doorway to go through. Then on the chart, you'll see in the middle up there, key life areas. So it's going, okay, it's an emotional doorway. So which part of the life is it? So we narrow it down a bit more. And let's say the doorway we're going through is relationship or family. Then we can test, okay, show us more about family. So things get filed in the unconscious. So you can see on the right there that circular, fire, earth, metal, water, wood, the flow of emotions. Then I can test using a muscle test. And again, I often say to people, look, this is not magic. I literally test, show me which circle, show me the number, right? And use a muscle test and discover a word. What is the emotion most connected, let's say, to relationship? What is the negative emotion filed away that that this unconscious has connected to, say, relationship? And let's say that it's something like humiliation, the fear of humiliation. Then, of course, that's going to impact on relationships, if that unconscious connection. And I say to people often, I don't need to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And again, I think a good psychiatrist or a good psychologist are wonderful to help people. I don't come up with the stories that are connected to these emotions. I just say, look, that's what appears to be filed, connected to relationship. You can imagine that would have an impact. And then, I literally just follow the trail. So the next one down the bottom right there is the reactive behaviors. If, for example, we have the negative emotion of the fear of humiliation, for example, connected to relationships, then we will put in place behaviors to deal with that, either to cover it up or deal with it. And so, again, we can test that. And in amongst that, using a muscle test, we can ask the system, show us the age at which that core connection happened. And literally using a muscle test can come up with an age. And this is where, just talking about it, a lot of people might be skeptical and go, how does that work? And I think really the only way to say is you got to experience it, And I'm always clear with people that this is not the only way. This is not perfect science. It has a lot to do with belief and intuition, but those are not insignificant tools in understanding who we are and how we might heal. So I literally just follow through the chart, and it's always with the person. It's not, it's interactive.
Yeah.
And the other bits of the chart, I've got the chakras there because sometimes there's an energetic interference. There's, what I call biogenic root, meaning a lot of that which we experience in this lifetime may be connected to, even if you don't believe that there are previous lifetimes. And for me, it's not, it doesn't matter what, what's the philosophical belief system is. It's just true to say that we are influenced by our genetics. If it's true that we're influenced by our genetics prior to our lifetime, then it's probably true energetically that we are influenced by the past. And so we can get quite specific about that too, asking about ancestries. And again, and often that feels like being psychic, but I always say, I'm just using a muscle test. It's information that you have.
Yeah.
And again, similarly, I've got over the bottom left, limiting beliefs. Because often in our life, I was raised, my mum and dad went through the Depression in the 30s, in the 1930s. And my dad was an entertainer, but during the Depression, he had to ride a push bike for threepence a week. And we used to hear the stories of how hard it was during the Depression. So my dad raised us with, one of his experiences was, you've got to work hard to make a living. And life is not easy, right? Both of which don't have to be true, right? So you've got to work hard to make a living, for example, is part of my upbringing, part of my unconscious experience, part of the structuring of how my life was constructed, right? It's just not true, because lots of amazing things happen without working hard. But that belief system was something very powerful in my unconscious. So that, earlier in my, or for a large part of my life, I never took holidays. Because
Excuse me.
you can't possibly take a holiday. You've got to work hard. You can't make a living if you're not working. And there's lots of people making amazing livings who are not working hard. So
right. Thoughts are not facts. Newsflash.
That's right. Exactly. So, things like the fear of accountability, or I'm not good enough, or the universe is not friendly. These are all beliefs that we experience, or we have experiences that help form the structure of these belief systems, which are actually hold us back. So, as an example, I've treated so many natural therapists in my own clinic who want to be a natural therapist, want to start a clinic, but are afraid to charge people because they have a limiting belief that what I do is not valuable, or I'm not allowed to charge money for doing good, right? All of these. So we have a whole landscape of unconscious information that if we could become more conscious of it, we would be able to realign it, reintegrate it, or release it if we need to. Mm-hmm. And then the final one is the lesson, because I always think every issue, even a sore knee, has a lesson. And if we can get insight into the lesson, that will help us heal. And again, I think it's really important, again, to say that the healer is not me, the healer is you. And there's a wisdom within, which I think could be also described as the awake consciousness that we are within, that has incredible power to liberate us and to heal us. So if we can get some pointers towards that, and if I can help give people some pointers towards that, then their self-inquiry can be perhaps a bit more specific, and therefore the result can perhaps be, some results I've seen are just incredible, Yeah. But again, I'm always careful not to, claim who I healed and didn't heal, because I didn't heal them. They healed themselves. So, but, when people have insight into certain issues in their life, amazing things can happen. amazing things. And I've seen so many amazing things happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and oh, there's about 10 directions I could go from here. I guess I'd want to say one, um, the one session that I did have from you for people who are like, well, how does this work? I mean, I can just validate for the audience that, you went right to a core issue that, absolutely resonated, knowing nothing about me. I mean, we'd had one brief conversation, and the clarity that you provided in the one session we had, you know, was remarkable. So I will just say, I don't really understand how it works either, how that accessing of information, but you're certainly right on for me, and it was very, very helpful to have that clarity. So
Yeah, thank you. And I get the side benefit that it's helpful to me too, right? Because so often I have the experience of doing a session with somebody, and I will write down afterwards, wow, wow, that was a really good insight. That wasn't because I'm so wise and smart, just because I think we get to open doors where wisdom, the innate wisdom of humanity, can start to show through.
yeah, pure consciousness is very, very wise.
Yeah, yeah. And
We
it's
let
like,
it talk to us.
to be surprised by sometimes to be surprised what comes out. It's where I learned that, wait a minute, something's going on here that is way past just my innate brilliance, right? Because I look in the mirror and I don't see innate brilliance. I just see me, right? And sometimes things would come out and people go, how did you even know that? And I go, yeah, good idea, good thought. I don't know. Because there's a lot of wisdom within.
Wisdom within. I love the wisdom within, and how you talk about that. So how long did it take you? This is the Ian Haycroft system, basically. How long did it take you to develop this beautiful system?
And again, look, I won't. A lot of this system is bits and pieces of other people's systems, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not mine.
Okay.
In that sense.
Caveat.
Yeah, yeah.
Understood.
But I think I learned a system from a kinesiologist, which has a lot of these elements in it, and I loved it. But then for example, the energetic interference part of that chart. I read some books and I just thought, yeah, look, we should be able to test for that. We should be able to test, is there interference in this person's life that has to do with beyond just their own body, because we all live in an energetic system. We are surrounded by energy, energy in different kinds of forms, right? And I know some of the people that you work with, Holly, do amazing work in relation to angels and the afterlife. And so again, and I often say to people, look, it's not critical whether you believe things or not. I'm just testing stuff, right? So, but often we can test for, is there interference with somebody's life that is coming energetically to them, either from the past, that is their ancestry, where they may energetically have inherited certain elements of that past, or those that they're related to. We're surrounded physically and spiritually by all kinds of information and influences, so we can test those. Yeah. And that can be helpful for people, I think, very much so.
Yeah, wonderful. Wow. It's really cool. We'll see. Maybe we'll stop screen sharing, and I would love to ask you. I thought it was really helpful to see that underneath the hood a little. Hope other folks did too. And you talked about at the beginning when you opened up about awakening, that we're all at some level on this path to awakening, and I would love to hear you talk more about that, and specifically in your experience now, from all the people you've helped, what do you think holds us back generally from awakening?
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, my experience of myself, right, is that which held me back the most, has held me back, is a belief about myself that's just not true, about who I am. This idea, so it's the small self, the ego self. Um, I believe, I for so many years believed the stories. I can't do that because I'm not going to be able to go in that direction. When I first started doing this, it was like, I don't know, I'm going to have my own clinic. I don't know. I need at least 10 years of training before I'll put a shingle up. And, because I didn't believe that I could actually do what I do. My view of myself was based on my experiences. And I came to, over time, working with others and myself, began to realize uh, we are not the sum of our experiences in our life. We are physical, chemical, emotional, energetic beings, but we are not defined by the sum of our experiences. Otherwise, I know I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So then just little by, I think like so many of those people who are following you, right, that we try different things, right? I tried meditating when I was 22 and couldn't do it. And then I went to a Buddhist monastery, and I remember going to a Buddhist monastery in Nepal, and in those days there was a few hippies like me going to these places, and we'd sit down for the one meal at noon, so no breakfast, meal at noon. And I remember sitting there, and all the monks plus us kind of hippie novitiates, right, sitting there, and nobody's eating. They're meditating on the food, and I'm going, this is kind of, because I was raised in a Christian, right? This is cool. We're saying grace, right? And then a half hour later, we're still not eating, right? And I'm discovering, because I thought I was such a cool meditator. I'm so cool. Look at me. I'm so enlightened. I've got long hair and I wear robes. I must be enlightened. And I was just going, well, come on, let's eat this stuff, right? So I don't know quite how I got into that story about the pathway to enlightenment, but I think it's the process of discovering we're not just the sum of all the parts, that there's something much more that we're destined to, right? And I think, so I love David Hawkins, right? The Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force and a lot of other books. And he actually took muscle testing to a whole new level. He took it to the level that not only can you test a being, a human, you can test consciousness, you can test the truth or not of anyone. And a lot of people found that controversial. But he had a beautiful analogy of saying, why would you resist enlightenment or awakening? Why would you resist? It's impossible not to be. And he would use the analogy of God's like got a fishing rod and you're hooked and you're just being wound in. And it's like, why are you trying to swim the other direction? Just give up and just go with it, right? So that's why I use that rocket ship analogy, because I think the first stage, and things like what I do and lots of other modalities, I think help us launch from the gravity of the illusion that we are the sum of our parts. And there's a point at which then that first stage rocket falls away. And then effortlessly, we are flying towards awakening. And of course, when we're flying, there are always going to be times when we feel like we're not moving the way we need to, or something's not right. But there's a point at which it's inevitable, And so I often, in fact, this morning before this session, I had a session with somebody, and I was saying to her, stop looking you don't need me anymore. Stop looking for unconscious stuff. You are in space, you're flying. Look forward, enjoy. Imagine what it feels like not to have to solve the problem that is you. You are not a problem. You are a amazing infinite being, right? But it's easy to say that stuff, but to say that stuff with somebody who's stuck in the midst of depression, right? Well, just let go and fly, right? Well, they're just going to go, you know, let me talk to somebody who's got
Right.
some logic, right? So there are times where we need to escape the gravity of the idea that we are the sum of our parts. That's not easy sometimes.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm ever going to be without work, at least in this lifetime. But
Yeah.
but my belief, my experience is there's a point at which you realize that's not the problem anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's such a beautiful answer. And your story about, or what you said about, what's the problem here reminds me of, been working with Locke Kelly's work, and the Mahamudra practices, right? And the first one in the audio that I'm listening to right now is like, in this moment, what's the problem? Like, is there a problem? And just as a really powerful question of inquiry.
Yeah, and I think there's a time when that stuff makes sense for people. I mean, I
Right.
remember in the midst of having, 6 small children, trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to make a living to take care of this brood that we created. And someone would say, life's an illusion. E- even um, even though I could intellectually understand it, right? There was a big part of me going, well, come join my illusion because I got to figure out how to get a job. Right? So,
Totally.
yeah. So, in fact, it's true. So many of the elements of our life are just illusions we create for ourselves.
Right.
In the midst of doing life and off the cushion, I think we just need each other. We need each
Mm.
other's help. And where we pitch that help has to be where somebody's at. And ultimately everybody, I think, is an awakened being. We're just not seeing it. But some people are really in the experience. I mean, I've got kids, I know, my kids are grown, right? But I talk to them on the phone about stuff, and I can go, that's all an illusion, right? Well, that phone call usually ends very quickly.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that it can be taken completely wrong. I mean, there's a lot of very serious global injustices, human injustices, planetary injustices that people are facing, that they're right in the heart of. So, you know, I guess I say that a little, even reflecting on it gently, because it is not meant in any way as a brush off to the
No.
enormous planetary problems we have. For me, it's this inquiry about awakening is actually to build resilience and unshakable strength in the in who we really are, so that we can come to every moment and take right action against real problems in the 3D world. So it's
No,
like we have to let it all fall away so that we can then be the service that we want to be to a world desperately in need of help. It really is it's a contradiction, isn't it?
yeah, I think but it's, I think, a historical contradiction that's been with us for a long time. I mean, I had this discussion with my brother. My older brother's a very political person, right? And I think, gets frustrated with me because I say, political systems, of course, they're important. I'm actually very grateful to live in a democracy. So I'm not going, oh, none of that matters. It does matter. But I say, but a political system without higher levels of consciousness informing that political system is going to fall apart. And we see it falling apart in lots of parts of the world. So I think working on raising our own consciousness and helping each other to grow in consciousness is actually what the world really needs. It's not to say that those other elements they should be addressed practically and down to earthly, but without a level of insight into what a human being really is, none of those systems will fix anything. And we can see that so many of those systems not fixing anything. But it's about bringing that experience of conscious awakening into everyday life, which is why I love the Locke Kelly stuff too. The glimpses off the cushion, start doing, how does that work? And then, but, and again, Dr. Hawkins, he has this view that as more and more people raise the level of consciousness, it actually raises the level for everybody. It's
Absolutely.
like a series of balloons, right? So avatars,
we
are
are all connected. Yeah.
we are absolutely connected, and I believe it's true, and my experience is it's true. I think there's much to be hopeful about, even in the midst of what appears currently to be a world falling apart.
You just answered what was going to be my next question was, are you hopeful or not hopeful given the world falling apart? So it sounds like you're in the hopeful camp.
I'm definitely in the hopeful camp, right? But not with blinkers, right? I see just the day-to-day struggles people are having. I don't want to be. I don't ignore those. But again, I think without recognizing who we really are, we won't find the real solutions to those. But just discovering ourselves, discovering our, divinity, our awakening, I think empowers us, enables us to do the practical things in the world in a way that can be effective. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Right. Oh yeah, I very much agree with you. And I think, even just an example playing out in the United States with the recent, Black Lives Matter, when the reaction is to get very angry. And I think there can be a wrathful, but a lot of what I've seen emerge is more of like a self-righteous anger that actually falls into the other camp. It starts to fall into the hate camp, which is negative energy, not positive energy. And so speaking to, we have to come with this higher consciousness that can be compassionate, compassionate anger, if you will, or knowing that this is not right. And but we bring to it a heartfulness and an understanding that we're not adding more negative energy to an already bad situation, and that requires a lot of consciousness. Yeah
there's plenty of that around. I think and having been one, I'm a classic Aussie male, right? Because much of my upbringing was if you see a negative emotion, make sure you bury it deep, and if it's too gushy and positive, you better bury that as well, right? So that's my upbringing, right? Now I often say to people, we are emotions, including anger and frustration and even hatred. They flow through us. The trick is see it, notice it, don't let it run your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and and your tools really feel to me they're very supportive of that, of doing just that.
No, absolutely, because I spent, I reckon, more decades than I'd like to admit saying I never get angry, right? And then my wife finally enlightened me to the fact, no, you just don't talk about it, you don't express it, and it's killing us, right? So I got to see anger, but then realize I'm not defined by it. Then I can experience anger for sure and see that there's plenty to be angry about. But then what's actually going to make a difference? Well, staying angry, it may make short term a difference. Long term, it'll only make more anger and hatred. And that's what we've got to avoid.
Yeah, we can't fight hate with hate.
No, absolutely.
So we talked about the muscle testing, but I'm realizing the one kind of thing that viewers may have a question about is, so we identify an issue, then what? And how long does it, after the then what do you do, or how do you help people? And how long does it take for some of these issues to be resolved in your experience?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, some what appear to be lucky people have these moments where they get awakened, and they're forever awakened. And I jealously look at those people and go, aren't I due a lifetime where I can get one of those? But it seems for a lot of us, there's a process, and it's a bit like peeling an onion, I think. So discovering certain issues you know, let's say, for example, using muscle testing, we can discover that someone may have, let's say, connected to being a woman, for example, because of past experiences, the emotion of humiliation connected to that, right? Well, that's the fear of being humiliated again will get in the way of being the kind of woman you want to be, or man if it's a man, right? That's an example of, if we can find, using a muscle test, get very specific about a time and what's connected to that, then that conscious recognition, I believe, my experience is that's what does the clearing, right? So how do you do that, right? So, and again, not plugging my website, but I've got a clearing meditation, right? But the essence of that is not, it's not complicated, right? It's so often when we have that experience of the fear of being humiliated, for example, we don't have a tool by which to just look at it and allow it to go. Right? So I've got a really simple process by which I just ask people to, and it's like a meditation, to first really calm down, get to a place, and again, ideally a place where there's no problem to solve, which takes practice and time, but as calm a place as possible, using very, breathing and just getting calm. And then putting that issue on a table or an altar, you can think however you want to do it. And what that does, it separates the issue from your idea of yourself. And so there's the issue. That happened, which made me feel humiliated, guilty, whatever it was, whatever it is. And it may be related to whoever it is. Just putting it on the table and observing it. And realizing I can observe this, it's not me. And by observing it and just allowing it to come, to show itself, then and the words are not important, but essentially is, I release you. I release you from every cell. I release you from my energy system. I release you from any time in my life. Right? So the words are not that important, but that idea. And just watch it go. Now, does that happen overnight? It may take a few times, right? But I think the process of just the real win there, I think, is to recognize, oh, that's not me. That's an experience. Now the experience may be incredibly, profoundly hurtful, or, but it's not me. And so it enables a chance just to let it go, reintegrate. You don't forget experiences, or you can, but most people don't. But it's not about forgetting them. It's about releasing the hold they have over the way that you act in the world at the moment. And if you can act in the world, in the present, in the moment, knowing that that stuff's not me, it's an experience, an emotion. I'm not my emotions. Now, easy to say, but I think there's a process by which we can put them on the altar, the table, and that sense of separating from them, going, okay, then I, the one who observes that, are not dominated or pushed around by or tortured by that experience.
So it's like a shining light on something that was previously sort of hidden in the closet of your unconscious somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah, and for a very good reason, because it's usually put in the unconscious to deal with it. But when you're ready to deal with it, then you can actually go, okay, I release it.
So when you take humiliation out of the closet and you put it under the light, that very act, what I'm hearing you say is that very act of pulling it out of the closet is often enough, supported by this sort of affirmation of releasing, to not be bound to it anymore.
Yeah, and then I think what happens, sometimes is, or often is, then you'll start to notice other areas of your life where the fear of humiliation. So the area we might have looked at in the clinic or in a session might be a specific one, say to do with sexuality, for example, right? But as you begin to notice and look and release, you'll see, oh, there's another area of my life where the fear of being humiliated comes up, right? It's like, But now you have the experience of being the observer and go, oh, okay, there it is again. Usually it shows up because it's like, right? I often say to people, if you have a feeling that comes that doesn't seem to be connected to exactly what's going on, because it's coming out of your unconscious. So then, okay, there it is. Cool. Let me release that one too. So I think, so that's the point. Over time, you become able to just observe as emotions arise, and then it's just practice, right? It's a learned skill. It's not like, oh, some hocus pocus or magic. It's just a learned skill. I observe it. And what happens, I think, is over time people become better and better at observing that which arises, and there's a point at which they don't need to look back anymore because they're already the first stage of the rocket is gone. No more need. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
again, I don't want to underplay it because some people have who have experienced sexual abuse or those kind of things, that they're impactful, and there's no magic formula. Oh, this will just take 3 days because it's so wonderful. It's a process. It's a process.
Absolutely. And I guess for me, it's the belief that, as you say, we're not the product of our experiences. We're not bound to those negative experiences forever if we don't want to be. There are pathways to be released from them. Not invalidating the, horrible experiences that people may have, truly. There are plenty of them. But only just to say there are pathways out of being bound to them.
Absolutely. And I've had the experience so many times now of discovering with a muscle test something, and someone will say to me, I've never said that to anybody in my life. And I think just the fact of going, look, I said it, then it loses its power.
Yeah. Well, beautiful wisdom. I'm aware it's a little past 6, and I want to be cognizant of your time, but just as we wrap up here, I would love, is there anything that we didn't touch on or anything you would like to say that feels important to be said before we close?
I think we're all in this together. So why I'm very grateful to be here with you, right? And the work you're doing and others you're connected to are doing is, I think this work is gathering momentum, and it's all needed. We can add a piece. I feel like I can add a piece, but there is an awakening happening that I think is incredibly wonderful amidst all the pain, and the suffering. And I kind of dance between that myself, just going, I don't want to ignore the pain and the suffering, and I want to be a practical, active involvement in that, but without the experience of the awakening that appears, none of the practical action will be enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So thank you, and to all those out there who are doing their bit too.
Absolutely. There are plenty of people that watching now and who will watch. Nod to all of you who are doing that positive, higher consciousness raising work. I love what you said, and it's very heartfelt, and I very much agree with you. Yeah, we're all needed doing our part to raise this one consciousness up together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it is such an honor to be here with you on the journey of raising consciousness, Ian Haycroft. Where can people find you if they would like to have a session with you?
They can just go to the website, which is the www.theclearmindway.com.
Okay, theclearmindway.com.
If you go Clearmind Way, you'll get to a wine company, a non-alcoholic wine company. So theclearmindway.com.
All right, great, and I'll be sure to put that in the show notes too. That's funny.
Everything's there, and I've got a wonderful person helping me to get onto Facebook and other things too, because the techie stuff is not my forte, but yeah.
But they can find you there.
Yeah, you can find
Okay.
me there. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, it is such an honor. I just loved having you in the conversation. What a delight. Thank you so much for your time. Truly.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thanks to everybody.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody. Absolutely. Um, and you can find me if you're interested in coaching work um, at heartmindalchemy.com. If you like the show and you want to, throw a few dollars in the hat as a tip or something, you can go to patreon.com, heartmindalchemy. You can go to YouTube. All my videos go on YouTube, and you can go to YouTube and subscribe. I think I have 20 subscribers right now. I'm new at this, so I would love more subscribers. That would just make me happy to see those numbers go up. So thank you all so much for watching this, and until next time, we'll see you next week.